This is Red, White, and Bluegrass.
Town hall meetings across the country with GOP representatives have turned fiery in recent weeks, and they've now reached Kentucky's 6th district. Last weekend, a group called Gathering for Democracy invited Congressman Andy Barr to a town hall. Barr did not attend, and on social media, he called it manufactured outrage by paid activists. He instead hosted a telephone town hall on Monday. Kentucky Democrats hosted another town hall on Wednesday with former Representative Yarmuth, who's here with us. Fox 56 News political analyst Jonathan Miller says the event follows a national trend capitalizing on the anger that some voters have over decisions made by the Trump administration. Miller compares it to the Tea Party movement of the Obama years.
A lot of conservatives really gathered their resources and organized campaigns to build public dissent, and I think Democrats are following that model and trying to do the same thing here.
Miller says Democrats could be eyeing the district for several reasons. He says although that district has grown more Republican since redistricting, it was still carried by Democrat Governor Andy Beshear in 2023. And Barr is rumored to be joining the Senate race to replace Senator Mitch McConnell. So, Mr. Yarmuth, I'll go ahead and start with you here. Yeah. You were in town this week, and I'll just straight up ask, do Democrats see some competition or a possible chance to flip the 6th district?
I think so. I know the National Democratic Party, the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, thinks that this seat is winnable, and they're going to deploy resources if we can get a good, solid candidate, which I think we will. You know, the seat was held until 2013 by a Democrat for most of history, and when I got to Congress, Ben Chandler was in that seat, and so it's not a crazy thought to think that a Democrat could retake the seat. In this district, as I understand it, and I'm no expert in the 6th district, but it's all a question of who turns out. And if you can turn out your voters in this district, you've got a real chance. And there are a lot of Democratic voters in this district. That's not the case with some other Kentucky districts where there just aren't Democratic voters. It doesn't matter whether you turn them all out or not. But here, I think it's a battle for turnout. And I think the candidate, whomever we nominate, will have the resources to do that.
Well, let's bring in Mr. McCarthy on this conversation. The RPK called this a protest in their statement about it. Do you agree?
I think there's a little bit over, look, people in both parties are going to have opportunities to make their voices heard. The Democrats are doing that here because they look at this as an open seat, because we're trying to figure out who actually will run for the United States Senate. I'm wondering, Congressman Yarmuth, if you're actually here in Lexington to think about running for U.S. Senate.
If you had heard me the other night and some of the things I said, you would know that that's not the case.
Well, my point is that Andy Barr won this seat by almost 25 points last cycle. And so Republicans in this district that stick to the, being for families, being for doing the right things each and every day to help improve our communities, and making sure national defense is strong, and standing up for those rights that they believe in, and that Donald Trump carries this district, and he'll carry it again, whoever, in my opinion, runs on the Republican ticket in 2026, because that's what we're talking about, is 2026 election cycle.
Do you agree with Mr. Miller's take there that there's something similar going on here with the Tea Party movement of years ago?
Absolutely there is, because every party has frustrated individuals who are upset about the outcome of the last election, or they believe that there is a step that they believe that their concerns and group of concerns can help their party move forward. The Tea Party did that. Rand Paul got elected. So these things do have a way of rolling through both political parties, and it usually comes from a place of frustration, and they're frustrated because they didn't win, and they're frustrated because the policies that they want to run on are not being receptive to the larger voters. I mean, let's just look at the people in the broad spectrum of the types of people who ended up electing Donald Trump. It was the greatest, broadest, dispersed nature of people and of all race, creeds, colors that elected Donald Trump in this last election. And if I'm a Democrat, I'm scared to death of that.
What did you say there?
Well, I think there's a difference between the Tea Party and today. And the difference is in the Tea Party, the Tea Party movement was a movement rejecting what was in office at that point. And today we have, I think, a sense that many of the people who supported Donald Trump are now saying, wait a minute, we didn't bargain for this. This is not what we voted for. And I think that's what Democrats are counting on. And that's one of the reasons we're doing these types of town halls, to say, this is how the actions of government, we're going to talk about DOJ in a while, This is what the the Trump administration is doing that is affecting your lives adversely, and connecting what they're doing to people's lives. Democrats have not done a good job of that. We've talked about all sorts of other things. We talk about saving democracy, which is I'm very concerned about, but that's an abstract concept. We need to talk to voters about how government affects their lives. And I think what people are seeing now is, yeah, we thought Donald Trump was one thing, but he's doing something very different right now. And I think that's why Democrats think we have an opportunity.
But Donald Trump said in the first 100 days that he was going to do things different. He was going to protect our American by closing the borders and doing everything he could there. He's done that. He's talked about eliminating the waste in government. He's doing that. He's talked about making sure that we're a dominant player again in the world of international, politics towards a safer world. And I think he's done those things. So let's just see. There's a lot of time between now and Election Day in the past. And if I was on the Democrat side, I would be trying to pay as many people as I could to come and try to muster up some sort of enthusiasm for my party as well. Because that's really what these have become. These are absolutely organized and trying to get us to see if there's really a pulse out there of Democrats within the 6th Congressional District. And there's always going to be angry people who show up if you give them an opportunity. And that's what these are.
Well, you had a quick response.
Nobody got paid to come Wednesday night to
to
our event. Well, the Democratic Party organized it. Nobody got paid to show up. And if you looked at that crowd, unless George Soros is visiting senior citizens' homes, I don't think you'd have a pretty strong case that was not the case. These were spontaneous reactions and people who came. But I think if that's the measure, if there is a pulse, there is a pulse here in the 6th District, because that was quite a crowd. There was quite a lot of enthusiasm and quite a lot of frustration with Andy Barr and with the national agenda. And I still will say one final comment. On the international scene, you listen to world leaders, and Donald Trump has absolutely changed and damaged our leadership role in the world. Our allies can't count on us anymore. The only person who counts on us right now is Vladimir Putin.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and leave it right here before we move on.